Winning. Oh, hello, Rog the Dodge. Rog,
Hey,
hello, my friend.
hello there.
Bloody hell, long time no speak.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about doing a live to talk about the obvious. Let me put
Yeah,
my camera on.
the
But
the elephant in the room. Oh,
yeah, and but then I saw you were live, so I thought, well, there's no point then. And obviously this is probably not the place to do that, but we maybe should do it because
yeah,
I need to clarify my position. You know, I'm always interested in movement issues, as you know.
yeah, yeah.
And I see this as a movement issue, and in particular about responsibility. You know, I mean, this guy is seen by many people as a spokesperson, if not the main spokesperson
Could
of
we
an entire
explain, Roger?
social
So,
movement.
sorry to overspeak. Could we explain a bit to the audience? This is
Well, I
about.
don't know whether you want to get into it, to be
I'm
honest. But
I'm happy to do that. I won't do the whole
okay,
live on it because I want to bring people up and put people straight about animal rights. But we're talking here about, for those who know Gary Yourofsky, who has come out from under his shell, and he's quite I mean, I don't want to be ad hominem kind of thing, but he's quite arrogant sort of person, and he seems to think that saving 500 caterpillars in his recent comeback speech was something to crow about. So well done, Gary. But he's got some what I find, and I think you find, very objectionable and problematic views in terms of human animals, particularly in Palestine, and presumably elsewhere. And he excuses it by saying that he's not a big fan of humanity anyway, and therefore he can say that. And yet he only seems to pick on certain people in certain countries. So, but
yeah,
what?
well, a big fan is a real understatement because he
I
said he says
absolutely.
he hates humanity, and
Yeah, oh yeah.
this hatred extends to vegans. See, I interviewed him. You know, I was part of this thing called AR Zone many years ago, and we actually did a lot of promotion of the Georgia Tech thing. So the Georgia Tech thing, for people who don't know, is the one that is always promoted as the greatest speech ever and this kind of stuff. And in isolation, I've always said this, in isolation, it is a good talk. I mean, obviously it's dated now, but it's a good talk. He did about 250 of them at least, and he used to do lots every year. One interesting thing about that, because I've been a university lecturer, is when you've done the same lectures several times, you get good at it. You know, you get good at the timing and all the rest of it, just like a kind of stand-up comedian. And on this one, he's very articulate. But there used to be earlier versions of it where he was a bit more all over the place, and they kind of got taken down. And I will say that I think that Yourofsky was the first person, or the small team that was around him, was the first person who came to understand the internet in our movement. I don't think we took the internet seriously. We didn't really know it as a tool, whereas he did, and he had a team of people. And for a good year and a half, whenever anything about animals was coming up on this new kind of fangled thing called Facebook and stuff, they would write in and go, yeah, that's very interesting. Hey, by the way, have you seen this? This is a new talk that, you know, and so they really, really heavily promoted it. And that caused a lot of people to go to it, right? And so, I mean, you've got to kind of credit him for that. And that's also why he was very articulate in that particular speech, because he'd done it so many times. So I've always said that was good. So we interviewed him, and I wanted him to say that he would renounce, again, thinking about the movement, that he would renounce the violent statements that he'd made. Now, we probably don't really need to go into that, and you'd probably have to be very careful with the language as well.
Yeah.
But he's a kind of violent fantasist, and so he's got a kind of biblical eye for an eye kind of position.
Okay. Is he? Do you know? Is he religious?
I don't know, but I mean, it is very much eye for eye. You know, if you do this, then that same thing should happen to you, right? That's what he says all the time. You know, and so in that sense, it comes over as biblical anyway.
It does sound like US evangelical talk, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does a little bit. Yeah, and so I said to him, because I was part of a team, and we all submitted questions, and my particular question, which is still online, and the answer is, will you renounce those statements about violence? He said no. He said he stands by every word. I think he even said at one point, I think my essays are beautiful, I think he said.
Yeah.
He's so
shy of coming forward, is he?
No. But again, that was part of that thing about the internet. He was a very big self-publicist. One thing he claimed at one point was that 50% of every audience he spoke to went vegan, which clearly wouldn't be true. And in fact, if it was true, people would have paid him millions to carry on. If that actually was true. So and so it's always been on the basis of the effect on the movement that has always got my goat about the goat.
Yeah. Very good.
I just thought of that one.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
You've never heard that before. That's really good. Okay, yeah, anyway. Yeah. I mean, the problem is, one of the big problems is that he can be picked apart as well, can't he? So not only is he, you and I would say he's inconsistent on many levels, including the moral level as well, and on rights violations across sentient beings, if you like, and all animals. But he's also in danger of being able to be picked apart very much for some of those views which are against veganism, which go against the principles of.
Yeah, well, that's why, funny enough, because I was talking to Andy and Ronnie about this when he came back, and obviously joined AV, is kind of natural home in a way. I was a bit distressed because I was thinking the first time round we'd kind of dodged the bullet, the movement, in the sense that, and there's even a danger of me saying this, but in a sense that people like Piers Morgan hadn't known about this. Now, those violence quotes were picked up by some of the counter movements back then. But again, it didn't go viral and all that kind of stuff. There's a group called the National Animal Rights Interest Alliance or something like that. And, they picked up on it, but it never went viral. So, I mean, the last thing we want is for this guy to be on the Piers Morgan show and his researchers to have found all that stuff.
Well, they will, because he's quite open about it. They literally only have to watch that interview with that George Martin guy, and we're effed, aren't we? On that front, it's out there and it's current.
He did say it on national Israeli TV. I think that was the one about the flies. I don't know if you.
No.
Yeah, so he's got this violence fantasy about doing absolutely terrible things to people and then throwing them into a room full of flies to watch them being eaten alive or something. So, but he did say that on national TV in Israel, and which was a surprise, I suppose. You see, it's almost like, to me, a form of irresponsibility. If you're a spokesperson for a social movement, especially the ultimate peace movement, then that confers on you responsibilities, which I think you must take seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, we all have responsibilities, and that's the point of my lives and things like that, is trying to get people to understand that they have a personal responsibility and that they can exercise that personal responsibility without any excuses, just to as much an extent they can. But especially when you're more in the public eye, you do have even more responsibility. Your actions are taken, your words are taken quite literally by people. I think this thing. I know quite a bit about what I'm about to say, but I am not a professional psychologist, and it's never good to diagnose people on this basis. However, I shall now start to diagnose.
You're going to do it anyway, yeah. I'm
going to do it anyway. because I do know quite a bit about it, despite not being professional. That there is a lot of traits that you would say of a certain type of both, of certainly a personality disorder, with narcissistic traits,
Yeah.
very, very clearly, I would say, and fairly obviously, but also then verging on the antisocial, which is what we used to call S paths, P paths. Roger, I've got to answer the door. Do some talking.
Right, we're answering the door.